already written inside you symbolically through the language of mythology, through the language of astrology, and that you have a schematic. You have, and it's also your soul's itinerary. There's a timing. Like Joseph Campbell said, he said the latest incarnation of Mars and Venus, of Aphrodite and Aries, stands at the intersection of Sixth Avenue, waiting for the light to change. They're making out, and everybody's checking them out. And over here, we got Hermes is about to do a business deal down on Wall Street. It's like we live in a modern time. We use different tools. Things are going faster because of our devices and techniques, but it's still the human being. It's like we're very similar. We're very similar to the ancient Greeks. We're not that removed from that at all. Been demythologizing. The more scientific we become as a people, since the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, they call it reason, the supremacy of reason, and scientific method and analysis, and all the time proving it, and that we become more and more alienated from this inner. There's actually more power, much more powerful, and we're like but we become collectively focused in Hermes, like really strong. We're like married to our technology, and that's how we see ourselves and define ourselves and how we can save ourselves. But it's like this other, so it's like a dangerous situation. It's like a split right in the brain there. It's like the right brain is just been set aside. The left brain's running the whole show, and you're scripturally literate in a sense. You've made the effort to look into the words of Christ or the words of Buddha or the words of Krishna, or you looked into the mythologies of Greece, or it's like a lens of understanding. You kind of see what's happening on the big stage, what's happening globally, what's happening in your life. So it's a vital perspective, and it's largely neglected.
Welcome to this new special episode, which is part of a broader and more exciting series of maybe 3 episodes, maybe more. Let's see, with a very fascinating individual, a teacher and a master from Pi that we can call David Joseph, or HinduDave. That's how friends and family call him. How are you HinduDave?
I'm very well. It's good to see you, Luca. Makes me happy to see your eyes.
That's amazing. So HinduDave is a fascinating individual because of his rich background, coming from the counterculture. He has many years of studying and learning about psychology, mythology, about archetypes, about astrology. So he's a Jungian psychologist as well as an archetypal astrologist, and he has deep knowledge of world religions. So this is exactly, the kind of things that excite people like myself. And I had the pleasure of meeting HinduDave in Pi and hanging out with him a little bit. We had an interview back in November. But today it's a bigger thing because we have a theme that you want to develop, and we have a title for this special episode, which is Archetypes, from mythology to individual psychology. So first of all, I'd like to ask you, HinduDave, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and particular experience with sort of mythology and archetype?
I was living in Boulder, Colorado. When I was 25 years old, I moved to Boulder, and that began my entry into this whole field came by way of astrology. First, I was an astrologer, So I've been an astrologer now for like 45 years. And astrology led me directly, immediately into mythology, uh, because the planets are the gods. They're the primary archetypal configurations of the human experience. It makes the whole human experience. And and my studies very quickly led me to Carl Jung. So that was the next. And of course, he already died in 1961, but his work is so profound and so oceanic, and and Joseph Campbell comes out of that route. He's a Jungian, um, uh, or he was also. He left his body in 1986, and he was a professor of world religion and comparative mythology, and amongst his students was George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars. The whole Star Wars was inspired by his work. The mythological and the archetypal level of a human life. That's like uh, the inspiration and stories of our life, how we see ourselves and how we're moved from inside. The drives. These are like the drives in the psyche, right? The different plant. We'll talk about all the 10 drives that drive us human beings to different kinds of action, and how do we navigate it and how do we personalize it. And but my studies into mythology really amplified when I met Joseph Campbell in California in 1983, and his work is just unbelievably brilliant. He was a professor for 38 years at Sarah Lawrence College, and he wrote The Hero with a Thousand Faces, The Mythic Image. So it was like it was seeking out and finding a hero and a real one, and in this field. And it was like, um, and that spirit of like the globalness of it, the what Jung referred to as the collective psyche, the collective unconscious, or the objective psyche, and the mythology is like that's the currency in there. That's the primary language being spoken. And really, in our own brain, you look at how our brain is structured. We have our left and right hemisphere. The left hemisphere is all involved with uh, uh, navigating this world externally, and rational thought, and the whole digital realm. All that's activity of the left brain. The right brain is the symbolic and intuitive and dream generating and artistic brain, and that's where the myths. That's the mythic side of us. And it's like a much bigger pit. Like the left brain's more of the ego and personal psyche, the individual, and your personal drives and your persona and how you present yourself. But and again, it's a yin yang right in our cranium, right? There's the light and the dark. Left brain is the light, they're going out to meet the world, and lights and thoughts flashing away and connecting things, and the right brain's in the dark, uterine ocean of symbols, and thinks in terms of centuries. The left brain's right here and now, breaking edge. What's the latest app, the latest tool we can use to make it all happen faster? But the right brain is like living in the Middle Ages or something, thinking about something Christ said. When I found Joseph Campbell, I could be with him in person, and I was so blessed. I had some very, very profound for me, and beautiful experience I shared with him personally. We took a couple walks together alone down by the Pacific Ocean near Esalen Institute in California, and did some body work on him too. And so he was like in such a profound presence. He was so encyclopedic. He never referred to a note. He was like just give a whole discourse on the moment. Jung was very much like that. So it's like, so that's when I went to another level with mythology. But that whole spirit of all the world's mythologies having a single orchestrating core, a single thread of, that's the nature of the archetype. These are the universal themes running through all humanity in all different times and all different civilizations and running through the contemporary world. So to like have access to this level allows us to mythologize our life, and our life has deeper meaning and significance, and there's a trajectory, there's a pattern. We're actually born with a pattern, a particular destiny, or it's inherent in us, and all this is like encoded in symbolic, which is not in the you work hard to learn how to language it and find the right words to describe it, but really it's and how an image too, like even when you're using computers, right? An image uses much more computer space, much more, it's like, whereas text just kind of flies by. That's like my background with mythology. And then I pilgrimaged a lot internationally. I've been to India 22 times. And again, too, hit pay dirt there. It's found some major masters, and then went directly to the deities. I'd go to Vrindavan, Krishna's birthplace and headquarters, and go to Bodh Gaya and sit under the Bodhi tree where the Buddha became the Buddha. Hanging out with Rama and Hanuman up in Ayodhya. and then Egypt as well. My wife and I spent 6 weeks in Egypt, and in the Yucatan with the Maya. I spent a lot of time in the Yucatan and the pyramids, and so going, and then seeking out my mentors in my, finding Joseph Campbell, finding Timothy Leary. That was a precious part of the story for me too. And he's on a different path, so that's my background, and in this field, and it's just inside my soul's DNA. But so anyway, that's just some background in this field. I'm also different things. I'm a body-centered psychotherapist, and I'm a deep tissue psychotherapist, and so I did that too in the breath work, and Stan Groff too. I studied with him, but it's like, but in terms of this discussion,
for
I'd
sure.
say it's astrology, Jung, and Joseph Campbell.
That
And that's what
sounds
I'll be doing.
amazing. That sounds amazing. As I mentioned earlier, I had the pleasure to have like various chats with you. I had a astrology reading very recently, which changed my mind about astrology and about myself, and they really gave me so much insight. And it's not so much just for me personally, but I think people in general would benefit massively to understand and relate to cultural myths in a way that is more positive, because I feel like these days myths are being sort of derided or discarded as non-useful, as non-scientific, etc. But if I look at culture, my culture coming from Italy, living in England, etc. It's a series, it's like a narrative, some sort of story, some sort of, it brings symbols. So when I relate to people back home, there are rituals in place that are informed by culture. And the same rituals are applied by everybody when you greet people, when you sit for lunch, for dinner, when you have to do some business with people, etc. Right? So we are influenced by culture massively, and culture is based on narratives, stories, sort of some sort of is a map of sort that helps us navigate the social landscape and behave in such a way that we can find collaboration, support, love, and so that we can thrive in individuals, right? Cultures are some aspects of them are more supportive. Some other ones are maybe more restrictive for the individual personality or the individual ego. But we can all agree that a lot of the way that we are, in the way we perceive the world, is informed by culture, and culture has a reflection on our individual psychology. And culture is largely based on myth and symbols. Can you sort of like explain a little bit more?
Well, it's like, it's true. It's like there's a mythologizing process going on all the time, and there's the things that compel the masses, and the things that are intriguing and have the juicy edge, what the Jungians call the zeitgeist. zeitgeist, that word bumped around in its original. It's a compounding of two German words, Zeit and Geist, time ghost. So the spirit that ensouls the time, the invisible, the thing that like the fashion that is cool, the things that people are talking about, the things that are, that's the contemporary mythologizing process. And it's obviously, it's like through the lens of astrology, we're accelerating into the Aquarian age. Aquarius is the sign of science. That's the new religion, science. The new priesthood are the technicians and the algorithm guys and the and all the accelerations and AI and speak a secret language. Like on former times, priests, like in India, for instance, ordinary people didn't speak Sanskrit. They didn't know how to do the necessary pujas and rituals and things, So it's the same thing now. We use our devices and things, but the ones who are really behind the screen, like making these things are like the new priesthood. So that's an example, but it's like, but then there's these deeper levels of culture that, as a Jungian, that's where I do my work in excavation, where you're like going underneath the movements and activities of present culture, and like diving into the deeper drives and the deeper. It's always like a historical lens too. You're not just focusing on what's happening now, which is very important, and that's your sun sign. Your sun is like focused on present, but the soul, the psyche, is the moon. The moon is the past. It's like and the necessity, and for because it's a psychological level. It's your psyche and your psychological state and the person that you evolved into out of this particular family and out of this particular sign. So it's like to put attention, care of the soul, looking at that side of yourself, and it's like all these treasures that are part of the past. It's like people like turning their back on religion, for instance. It's understandable. There's reasons to rebel, but it's like we have a saying. It's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? You reject it, but you threw the most vital thing of all out. So there's all these hidden eternal gems, very precious. It's very young. Like for me, I was raised Catholic, like I think you were too, right? Yeah. And so, I rejected all of it. I was a complete rebellion. I was a rebel without a cause. But then when I met Jung and another Jungian named Dr. Edinger, it's like I rediscovered the tremendous beauty and the tremendous meaning, and like I couldn't stand to be in a church. Whenever I'm in Chiang Mai, I always go to mass, and it's exquisite. Like looking through this wide lens and seeing all the Egyptian influences and all the universal. So there's not a split in your own psyche. You reject something and split off, but you're like, there's this spirit of like retrieval and it's a whole different rhythm too. The psychological is much slower. It's much quieter because it's inside. So you're so like that part of reality where all the activity and movement on the surface that is now and present culture is sitting on. So you have to engage the present. He's part of being in this time, and it's a good thing to do, and it's interesting. But that inner anchor, that inner sense of, another layer of the psyche too, called ancestral unconscious. So all your ancestors through your line of DNA, they're all speaking to you. What the drives that they had and the things they strove for and they weren't able to realize, or that all that's part of your inheritance. That's all part of things knocking on the door from the inside. And so that same thing that's making the culture that's happening right now in Copenhagen, and the things you're doing, and the things that are interesting to your friends and your associates there, and that's also just filled with this symbolic material. There's like a deeper, and one of the values of looking through this lens and like like archetypal astrology, for instance, you can see the horoscope itself is like a map of your uh, of your soul's intention and purpose and mission for taking this birth, and your unique uh, destiny, your unique thing you were born to do and to open into from the inside. So these things they center us in the speed and the momentum and the acceleration of this time we live in, and all the excitement of it. But then there's this part of you. There's something you're. It's already written inside you symbolically through the language of mythology, through the language of astrology, and that you have a schematic. And it's also your soul's itinerary. There's a timing. Different. You look at the transits and things we were doing in the reading, how they trigger at different times, and a new part of yourself opens up. And so it's this dance between the inner and the outer. How to navigate the outer and be a creative participant, interface and collaborate with people, and then have your own inner sanctum, your own inner compass in there. So that's how I see. Like, I'm always kind of remembering this other part is really important. This other, like sailing on the ocean down there, Copenhagen. It's good to be in a boat that you can rely on, but also it's like you're on top of great depths. You're on top of you're riding on a mystery all the time, and it's like, what is that mystery? What fish swim down in there? Those are the archetypes. Those are the big whales down in there, and the things that in our lives, like our ego is like a little boat. We're floating in this big ocean of archetypes, and we're part of this long story, this long narrative, transgenerational historical narrative that's here and now. Now it's doing this. So anyway, those are some things that occur to me.
Yes, for sure. It's fascinating indeed. And, some of the archetypes that I started to learn, thanks to you, because of course you suggested some books and some further reading, were sort of the Greek archetypes. Of course, we come from the Western civilization, and a lot of the stories, that are present in our minds now originate from there. And although the human sort of the human being today might be looking rather different from the person roaming on ancient Greece, still there are some common traits, there are some characteristics that stay the same, right? Because I can say it intuitively, because by reading about the Greek and the Greek gods and the stories between themselves, I could recognize myself in it. I could recognize my mom, my dad, my friends. Basically, just by learning about Greek archetypes, which maybe is only the first step, because of course I learned 8 gods and 7 goddesses. Okay, that's my beginning, and then of course with astrology. Yeah, with archetypal astrology, then you can actually expand that, because then you go signs, you go houses, but that's something and a later conversation. But starting just from the Greek archetypes and the psychological characteristic and personality characteristics that were evident to me, I could apply a new map to the world, the social world, and people around me that is so life improving, right? So I could see.
Absolutely.
You remember? So can you tell us then, starting with the Greeks? Why do I like Hermes so much, and what kind of who do you resonate with instead?
Okay. Well, first of all, let's talk about the fact that we're talking about Greek mythology and Greek civilization. The Homeric Hellenistic civilization that was spread right into India by Alexander the Great and into Egypt, and it's like, and that as far as being Westerners, as far as being Western people, I'm an American. Most of us are. The Western civilization is European civilization, and then all the, it went from uh, it went from Athens to Rome to Madrid to London, New York, Los Angeles. Now it's knocking on Beijing's door, you know. But it's like, um, but the root is Greek, you know, and it's like, and the fire shone so brightly, is so like uh, like our science comes from there, medicine comes from there, our mythology comes from there, our governmental systems or aspirations, you know, any kind of democratic aspirations, or the conflicts between the authoritarian and democratic societies are right there, you know. Athens and Sparta going at it, you know. Sparta was hardcore authoritarian, those guys, you know. And so all these dynamics are right there in the beginning broth, and then how it spread so dynamically through Alexander. But Alexander didn't just travel with his army. He had a powerful army, very effective, very brilliant. He was like a genius military tactician. But he also traveled with, he was his childhood mentor, and he remained in close contact until he died young too. He's like 32 years old when he died, conquered the known ancient world. But his teacher was Aristotle, who was the student of Plato. So, you know, and so he was traveling with a whole entourage of philosophers and mythologists. And he had a passion, deep passion, for what's known as syncretism. Syncretism is this deep curiosity and respectful honoring of other religious traditions and other gods, and also how they line up with yours. So he was relentless. You got to India, it was like a smorgasbord, or Egypt as well. Like Hermes, right here. Here's Thoth. That's the Egyptian Hermes. They call him Hermes Thoth. In India, he's Ganesh. You know, they saw that very clearly. And they were wondering, wow, how is this possible? It turns out they share the Indo-European language, Sanskrit. So the Greeks in India come out of the same linguistic and cultural root. The Aryans, like now the Iranians are like the closest physically, but these people like southern Russia and Azerbaijan, and they spoke Sanskrit, and they their scriptures were the Vedas. They did all the mantras and the pujas and the chanting, and they were badass warriors, you know. It was like this great celebration of comparative religion, comparative mythology, as men would marry into different priesthoods there and things, you know. And then his city, Alexandria, became the cauldron for all this early East-West stuff, really early. We're talking like 2,500 years ago, you know, 2,300 years ago. And then that became like the Greco-Egyptian symbolic, you know, astrology, Kabbalah, Tarot, alchemy, all that was part of this brew. And then they had like Buddhist monks were in Alexandria having discourse with different philosophers, Hindu sadhus and things. This, you know, 2,300 years ago. And so that's where our culture and the Greek gods are at the heart of it, and they're right and they become the astrological deities.
HinduDave, when you think of god archetypes, so different gods have different psychological characteristics, different personalities, and we also, as human beings, as individuals today, have you know, distinct personalities and predisposition to a certain extent. How does the individual psychology of somebody living today relate with these ancient myths and the psychology or the characteristics of the gods?
The gods are like the archetypal potencies that the gods represent and are symbolized in their mythology and in their stories, and those are the prime drives and ingredients of the human experience. And then we interpret them through our own life and our own our own personalities and likes and dislikes and propensities, and it's a modern rendering. But the themes, so for instance, like Aries, Mars, if that's like a strong archetype in a man's psyche, he's going to be down pumping iron. He's looking for he wants to get into a Muay Thai encounter somewhere. He's like he's down at the sports bar, and yelling at the announcer and the referees, and he's very body centric and about power and want to push your envelope all the time. You want to do the next crazy thing or brave thing, do something that gets the adrenaline, the adrenal glands. Those are the glands of Mars. So all the planets are inside our body too. Mercury, you're talking about, he's the throat chakra, and he's bad, like Mercury, and rules the nervous system. So your brain, your entire central nervous system, and he rules the lungs, and the whole respiratory system, the whole processing of prana, the most vital of all. I mean, you can survive without food for a couple months. Wouldn't be a pleasant experience, but you could. You survive without water for about 3 weeks before you go psychotic, and but air, we're talking in the realm of minutes, and that's Hermes. He's the prana, air element, and he's the shoulders, arms, and hands. So all the things you do with your hands. So the brain connecting to the hands, and then the breath. So it's like, so right there you see like this massive coordination of the archetypal influence, how it is inside your body.
So basically what you're
okay.
saying is that these archetypes are a map of sort, not just in terms of the psyche or the personality, but also in terms of the body organs. And
Absolutely.
that reminds me of Ayurveda a lot,
Exactly. They're all connected, right? It's all connected. You get down to this, like Ayurvedic astrology is big time inside there. Astrology is like right in they call the eyes of the Vedas. It's inside Ayurveda, and in Greece too, in the ancient world, you had to be an astrologer to be a doctor, because you didn't know the deeper patterns inside, and what organs are influenced by that, and also you can see what deity is strong here, where it says challenge here, and so you're looking at this deeper strata. But when you're looking at Western astrology, there are 10 planets. So there are 10, and a real simple metaphor, the planets be like the actors in a performance. The signs, astrological signs, will be the scripts and the screenplay and the theme of the book. The houses are the stage it's being performed on. So these 10, they're like prime ingredients. They're fundamental parts of the human experience. So we talked about Mercury, talked a little bit about Mars. So Venus, another ingredient. That's your capacity for pleasure, your ability to receive pleasure and to give pleasure, your romantic inclinations, your aesthetic, your sense of style, your sense of beauty. What do you consider beautiful externally and in your home? And it's the power of allurement too. It's like Venus is like a big flower just pumping out fragrance and pheromones and like this, It's Mars is chasing after, going after, running for, trying to impress, but Venus just pulls to herself. It's like Ramakrishna once said, when the lotus opens, the bees come. So that's the power of the goddess to pull to herself. And like I said, and it's also Venus rules music and the voice and color and spices and things in food, and the kind of sexual experiences you enjoy the most, what turns you on. That's all Aphrodite stuff. And so that's another core ingredient. Everybody has a Venus in their chart. Everybody has a Mercury. Everybody has a Mars. And so there's 7 other ingredients here, it's okay. And So we talked about the moon earlier too. I think before we recorded even, but how the the moon is the psyche. It's the feminine yin in you. It's your private world. Your how you talk to yourself. What do you think about? What are your it's like the it's like the inner dialogue, the inner memories, all the inner child, all your family of origin stuff. It's like also that's the moon, and then your moods and emotions and the need to be nurtured, to to receive nurture, and your capacity to nurture. So it's the mother archetype, the mothering impulse in every human being, whether you're a male or female. And some moons are going to be stronger in one person's chart than another. That's another ingredient, critical ingredient. The sun is your vitality and life force and your creative fire, and it's your relationship to present experience, to the power of the now and the capacity and it's the eternal dimension of ourselves. It's like the spiritual inner world. And then Jupiter is the wisdom principle in you, the urge to expand into deeper levels of meaning, to widen your vistas of understanding, exploring other cultures and other religions and other uh, and it's also a social planet, so it's your place in society and success you have in society, and how much power you've accrued to yourself, and how it's your generosity of spirit. uh, it's too much is just enough. That drive like that, Jupiter, is a. And then Saturn is maturation. It's the elder. It's the part of you that's in the stream of time, and it's also your discipline, your perseverance, the sustained will to achieve your goals. And so those right there, those seven ingredients, just right there, that's like, and so it's one of those. So your Saturn's going to be in a particular sign, going to be in a particular house. Your Mercury is going to be in a particular sign. It's going to be in a particular house. So like through astrology, you can personalize these mythological pantheon, your inner interior deities, and so there's that much part of us. It's just like it's like an ancient astrology is like the original psychology. It's like the mother science. Out of astrology came astronomy, mathematics, timing of activities to grow plants or to go to war. Or, it's like it's also the original psychology, all the different personality types, and then the connection of the inner and the outer. That the movement of the organism we're living in. We live inside the solar system. We're inside this flawless timepiece, right? All the planets all the deities and planets are moving at an exact speed and always in different relationships to each other. So it's like, from astrology's point of view, and the mythology that comes with that, those are the prime drives, the prime essentials of human experience, and we're all going to have to do that, and do it in different ways. So like the sun, for instance, can be a father, raise the experience of raising children, and how you do that, and how do you father other people's children. So it's just examples of how these things they're deep, and so they're always, like Joseph Campbell said. He said the latest incarnation of Mars and Venus, of Aphrodite and Aries, stands at the intersection of Sixth Avenue, waiting for the light to change. They're making out, and everybody's checking them out. And over here we got Hermes is about to do a business deal down on Wall Street. He's got a plan. He's looking for venture capitalist. This is the ultimate idea. This is going to make me rich. So the same drives. It's like we live in a modern time. We use different tools. Things are going faster because of our devices and techniques, but it's still the human being. It's like we're very similar. We're very similar to the ancient Greeks. We're not that removed from that at all.
So that's
You
the
know what I'm saying?
fascinating piece. That's the fascinating piece indeed. So even if, so for somebody maybe is watching this and is interested to learn, about themselves. Most people are,
Yeah,
that are looking at archetypes, they're looking
self-knowledge.
at mythology. They
Yeah,
want to learn about themselves. It's all linked to psychology at the end. So the basic axiom is that we have certain characteristics, certain drives, and all
archetypes. These are archetypes.
archetypes. So these
That's
are
what they call. That's what they are.
archetypal origins,
Drive.
and
Yeah, yeah.
even if you know it consciously because you learn the archetypes and you start relating to them and trying to put the pieces together within your psyche and your personality, or if you don't do it, you still have these archetypes driving you, and they drive your sort of individual psyche and your individual, they're in the individual unconscious, but also they drive society as a whole, as in the
Exactly.
collective
Absolutely.
unconscious. So that's why
Yeah.
archetypes are extremely important. And if you want to learn about yourself, it's a great way to learn about yourself and the world by studying the archetypes and learning how to relate to them. So that's what I've been doing recently. And it's a fascinating journey because, uh, psychology is
Absolutely.
fascinating, sociology is fascinating. And, if you learn about yourself and you learn about others, maybe you can find a way of living a more, harmonious or integrated, successful life.
Absolutely. One thing. The prime directive. When you go to the Temple of Delphi of Apollo in Delphi, Greece. Over the entrance to the temple, in the it says know thyself, know yourself, and so this by becoming acquainted to these archetypal uh, scripts, these dynamics, these drives, it's a significant part of knowing yourself. And Jung once said, and I totally agree with him, if you're not able, you don't have the capacity, you don't have the will or the discipline or the conditions to resolve an inner um, issue, like your inner unfinished business, things that coming karmic things coming from your childhood and from unfinished business. You're not able to work it out inside through self-reflection, understanding, through expanding your capacity to see the deeper significance of these things and to allow the memory to kind of thaw out and come up into consciousness, because it's like unconscious pattern. So it's like in deep storage. It's like frozen. If you're not able to like work it out internally or psychologically, then it comes at you from the world, from the environment, through an unavoidable set of circumstances or an encounter with somebody that you can't negotiate. It's just going to happen to you. So you lose a lot of free will. You lose a lot of, and then you're like locked into some kind of karmic dance because we weren't able to digest it sufficiently or integrate it or bring it into consciousness and awareness. So then it objectifies, externalize, can objectify too, in like psychosomatic disorders, different problems in the bodies, different psychiatric disorders. Like I said, we're so disconnected from this level of understanding, the mythic level, that Jung once said that the gods have become diseases. That's how they get our attention. It's like, man, then we gotta deal with it somehow. It's ruining our life. It's causing us to suffer, and so like I think I might have told you, but there's in the Gnostic literature, the Gospels that were unearthed in Egypt in 1945, right before the device was detonated in Hiroshima. These two Egyptian peasants were out looking for some fertilizer, and they hit this big pot buried in the side of a hill. At first, they were paranoid; they didn't want to open it because they believed in like genies and jinns and stuff. There might be something valuable in there. If they break it open, all come these tubes, rolled tubes, all leather, and they're the Gnostic Gospels, and all of the Gnostic literature is written from the perspective of the post-resurrected Christ. Like the Gospels of Christianity, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they call it the canonical Gospels. That's all about Jesus's life when he was teaching, what he did, what happened. But these are about he's teaching from the perspective of have risen beyond death. It's like this 40-day period after his death. So anyway, one of these gospels, probably the most complete, is called the Gospel of Thomas. And doubting Thomas, he's the one. He's like the scientist mind already. They're saying we saw Jesus. You guys are hallucinating. You've been under too much stress. The Romans they're gonna wipe them out too. Crucify. They don't mess around. Come in and clean out the whole thing. All the disciples, so they're hiding out. But Jesus pops in on him, and he says you're crazy. He says I'll believe it when I can put my hand into the hole in his wrist. I put my fist into his spear wound on his side, and so then he took off or whatever he was doing, and then they're all meeting again, trying to figure out how to survive and not get killed by the Romans. And Jesus shows up, and in the room, and Thomas, he goes, he can't believe, whoa, and then Jesus says, come, Thomas, put your hand in the hole. He says, no, it's not necessary. I believe now. He goes, no. He says, this is good that you question. And the Buddha said the same thing. He says, don't take my word. He says, test it, try it for yourself. If it works, wonderful. If not, discard it. So he says, this is good that you did this. He says, all people can learn from this. He says, good to question. It's good to challenge. He says, and then he puts his hand into his side and he falls on his knees and he says, my Lord and my God. Right. So that's Thomas. And all the disciples, after Christ's 40 days later, he ascended, his ascension, he like dissolved into the sky or something, and they spread out all over, like Peter ended up in Rome. He got crucified in Rome, and they went all over but Thomas went all the way to India. His samadhi, I went to it too, is in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, like Madras down there, But anyways, like background here, but in the book of Thomas, one of the things Christ says in there, he says, if you make conscious, you bring to awareness, and you make conscious that which is hidden in you, that which is hidden in you will heal you, make you whole, and fill your whole body with light. He says, if you fail to make conscious that which is inside of you, so these archetypes, these hidden patterns, the karmic configuration, you fail to make conscious that which is hidden inside of you. That which is inside of you will destroy you. Right? So it's like
what a prophecy! What a prophecy! It's fascinating.
It's pure on psychology, straight up psychology. It's like Zen Buddhism, and the word gnosis, real quickly, means direct experience, direct knowledge. Like Zen is the same thing, like direct experience of what the Buddha said, not just studying, but direct personal experience. So that's an example of that. And
yes,
so that's an example of like needing to make these things conscious, like how critical it is the point I'm trying to say. It's like, it's really, really, really important. Otherwise, there's going to be serious suffering, serious navigational errors, that you make the wrong choice because you're being driven by some ambitions or some, what other people are saying, and you need to get their approval, whatever you're doing that's outside of you. And something's like a locomotive running in there that needs your attention. And they call these things complexes too. They're like a condensed experience constellation. So it's like you're and at the center is some trauma. Something happened, in your childhood or something. Some deep wound with your father, deep disappointment, and it's always trying to work itself out. And it's always like finding father figures to revolt against, or You know, stay a rebel all your life. You know, it's like driving you from inside. You know, what is this about? What's driving me here? So that's making what's hidden in you conscious. And he says that will heal you, fill you with light. Be freedom. You'll be free. Buddha say things. You'll be free. Get free of these inner entanglements. And if you fail to do that, then it comes at you from the outside, and you can't run from it. Then it's like you got to deal with it. You know, it's like you're like you have to deal with this person, or you have to deal with this reality that you don't have money right now, or you got to deal with being in a relationship that's not working, or whatever's Venus is not cooperating with you at the moment. These kinds of things. So if you can, got to do it inside. You have to do it inside your own psyche, like a deep self-awareness, and patience too, like in speaking in symbols, and the myths help so much. There's so many examples, like in Greek mythology too, of dysfunctional families. The Greek gods were the ultimate dysfunctional family, right? That's why it's so powerful. Really, this is human big time. The human soul, all the craziness that Zeus is involved in and stuff, and all kinds of affairs, and his wife's going to take them all down, It's like this cosmic soap opera. It's like God's entertainment, this whole thing, it's like this divine drama. This is what like, we're the actors. It's inside of us, and we're like kind of like puppets if we don't become conscious. We're just compelled to do things. It's like we're not as free as we thought. Whoa. So when those things are moving, it really does eclipse the ego and eclipse the will, because it's so small in comparison. It's like these are gods after all, right? And they're coming to the surface. They want to talk to you about something, and usually that's serious stuff when that happens. It's like like when a complex is emerging, or like what happened to Odysseus, in the Odyssey. He pissed off Poseidon, man. He ended up bouncing around the Mediterranean for 10 years, you know, struggling to get home and losing his whole crew. And so it's like these things matter. It's like we're so far removed. That's the challenge. We've like been demythologizing. The more scientific we become as a people since the Renaissance and the like the Enlightenment, they call it reason, the supremacy of reason and scientific method and analysis, and all the time proving it, and that we become more and more alienated from this inner. There's actually more power, much more powerful, and we're like but we become collectively focused in Hermes, like really strong. We're like married to our technology, and that's how we see ourselves and define ourselves and how we can save ourselves. But it's like this other, so it's like a dangerous situation. It's like a split right in the brain there. It's like the right brain is just been set aside. The left brain's running the whole show, and so it's yeah, it's a very mysterious thing. It's like in the psyche itself, really, it's prime language. Like when you look at young children, like 5 years old, they love fairy tales, and there's a term they say called participation mystique, is the Jungian term, where everything's alive. I remember that, like 5 years old, it's like wow, everything's like magic and the trees, and then the ego starts really coalescing around age 7. We're really getting socialized. We're in school. Our families are really working on us, But the psyche itself, its language is mythology, mythic thinking, symbolic thinking, religious thinking, and art. All the inspirations of art, and so it's like we're living in a culture that's like really dissociated from that. For a lot of people have, but it's like it doesn't make it any less vital and important. Then it shows up in big wars, big upheavals, and imbalances. The imbalance gets so great that the earth can't sustain the chaos and things like that. So you get these patterns in mythology too, these big collisions of light and dark. Like Lord of the Rings, or the Ramayana, or like the Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita, these big, and then World War II acted out in the world. the big collision between forces and countless lives turned upside down and things. So it's like when you know these universal themes and you're scripturally literate in a sense, you've made the effort to look into the words of Christ or the words of Buddha or the words of Krishna, or you looked into the mythologies of Greece, or it's like a lens of understanding. You kind of see what's happening on the big stage, what's happening globally, what's happening in your life. So it's a vital perspective, and it's largely neglected.
HinduDave, so you are talking about meaning. Meaning is a very important sort of word these days, because I feel like many people in the newer generation, particularly even my own, have a little bit of a crisis of a lack of meaning. From what I can hear from you, it seems like meaning is very much linked to mythology in a way or another, and the absence of mythological stories and narratives can indeed bring forth nihilism, which is one of the biggest forces that we have to contend with, both inside of ourselves and outside in society. So are myths and mythology literally an antidote to nihilism and a root of meaning?
I would say yes, a very, very effective medicine and correct, like a corrective in a sense. And but meaning is essential. Without that, you can't survive. The species can't survive. Ultimately, it's like there's a line in the Old Testament of the Bible. It says, "Without a vision, without a vision, without a meaning, the people will surely perish." And it's like, so in an individual too, if you have meaning in your experience, even if it's difficult and it's challenging, and usually that's why we're seeking meaning, because it is challenging. Things are going smooth, there's no need to look. It's a let it run, we're having a good time. It's, this party on. But that's the function of crisis, actually. It's the soul prodding us toward a crisis of meaning, that we're compelled to look for meaning. What is, and the meaning, that's one of the great values of going to the deeper layers of the psyche, to the greater depths. Depth, like Jung's psychology is called depth psychology. It's like you're because only you hold the it's like you have the map room, you have everything's inside you, but you have to be able to get quiet enough and deep enough and sensitive enough to the symbolic, to be literate enough too, that you recognize the way the deep psyche is speaking. It speaks in mythic imagery and in symbolic manner. It's not a linear, it's not a discursive way. So it's like that passion to know yourself, right? Who am I really? Why am I here? What is my mission? Why did I incarnate at this time? But the meaning, like that, like the different mythic amplification, like Jungians call amplification, where you take like Hermes, for instance, and all the characteristics and qualities of Hermes. You're like amplifying the range, the spectrum of meaning there, and then as you're studying it and looking at it and feeling, you recognize this, and this, and so it's like exercising a atrophied psychic muscle. Anyway, we live in a very desacralized time, a very unmythic time. Even though you can't escape it, the mythic, you're more of an unconscious pawn then. We're saying it happens from the outside, rather than when you find meaning, that's how you're centering yourself from inside. You're finding out, what the deeper symbolic content is, and the purpose, and discovering deeper voices in yourself. They're like voices too. All these archetypes, they have a voice. They have ways of communicating with us, and it's always in their thematic basket. Like if Mars gets activated, you're more aggressive. You want to stand your ground. You're going to defend your position. You get more heated. The adrenaline starts pumping, and but we need to know about that part of ourselves, about the power that contains, and how do we bring our power and strength to any situation, our courage, because Mars is courage. How do we bring it to any situation we're in? We're really, you're challenged, but you're standing your ground, and you keep your bravery intact. You're willing to take necessary risks. Jump into the unknown. So those kinds of things. These are like the resources. They're more than resources. It's really like the main circuitry that it vivifies the whole human drama, and each of us individually. It's like, and one way to think about mythology too. Mythology is the dream of a people, of a collective, like in this case, the Greeks, the ancient Greeks. Their mythology and their all the stories of their gods, like it's a dream, a shared dream. Whereas an individual dream, when you're asleep on your pillow in Copenhagen, and you drift off, maybe you're back in Italy, or it's like very malleable, right? You can be different times, you can look different ways, and so that's your personal mythology. It is revealed through it's the same parts of the psyche. It's speaking in that kind of, because the dreams are highly symbolic too. They're not, some of the more mysterious dreams are very symbolic. So it's like how we get guidance from being sensitive to this way of thinking and this way of perceiving. And it's like kind of rights the ship too, because up on the surface, that's where all the noise and the chaos is too. All the churning and all the nihilism, like in the, there's this poem, I may have shared it with you before, but it's like, it really captures the mythological essence of this time. And it won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1920. And the poet was the Irish poet William Butler Yeats. And he was a member of the Golden Dawn. He was in the Magical Society in London with Aleister Crowley and all these other mystics and Dion Fortune. And he wrote this poem. And it's like and the poets, that's like they're the ones that capture the mythic essence of things. That's like Homer was a poet. The great Hindu writers, Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata, Valmiki wrote the Ramayana. There's like this eternal dialogue with these deeper levels of truth. But anyway, this poem captures this nihilism and the nature of this time and what we're collectively living through, the Aquarian age emerging so strong, and all the hyper technology and the velocity of everything. It's like a big cyclotron, all people bumping into each other. Whereas like, 150 years ago, it's like everybody was like in their own place pretty much, Now they're all churning together. But this is called the second coming. And it's the second coming of Christ is the reference, the metaphor, the book of Revelations. But this is an example of mythic imagery and thinking. Contemporary terms too, 1920s, it's like in terms of the unconscious is very, very recent. And it's very much part of the time we're living in too, from World War I till now. That it goes turning and turning in widening orb. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. The center does not hold. Things fall apart. Mere anarchy is loosed. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed. And everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are filled with the passionate intensity. Surely a revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image rising up out of spiritus mundi troubles my sight. A shape in the desert, the body of a lion and the head of a man, with a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, slowly churning its thighs. while all about reel the indignant shadows of desert birds. Darkness falls. Yet now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep have been vexed to nightmare by rocking cradle. And what rough beast, his hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. And now we're in the same, and so then the age of Aries, the Greco-Roman civilization, and all the Greek gods we're talking about, and the Buddha himself was born in the age of Aries. And Alexander the Great, who we talked about before, all Aryan values and spirit of the warrior moving forward into the world. And the ego was born in the age of Aries. Like the key phrase for Aries is "I am," and then and the Buddha was like the psychiatrist for that conundrum, that thing that was happening. It was necessary, but going to cause a lot of problems. And then the age of Pisces, the age of Aries end, age of Pisces begin. Age of Pisces, the age of Christianity, the Christ. Piscean avatar is Christ. And so our culture, Western civilization, deeply, deeply impregnated. Whether you're modern, you don't think about it, but it's like in the DNA. And Pisces is shutting down now Aquarius. And Aquarius is an air sign. Pisces is a water sign. And Pisces is like the teachings of Christ are compassion, forgiveness, love of God, faith, belief. Aquarius is the phrase, like the key phrase for Pisces is "I believe." Key phrase for Aries before is "I am." Key phrase for Aquarius is "I know." And all the technology and the new religion of Aquarius is science.
We can go and pick out of Christianity or mythology those stories at an individual level, at least, right?
Exactly.
So at an individual level, that's what we are doing now.
Great
that's what we are doing now.
Yeah,
so
great
we can,
opportunity.
It's great because we can disregard the institution. So we don't really need, like, the Catholic institution so much that is so oppressive in so many ways. But we can save the aspect of religion that are sort of the mystical side, the philosophical side that actually helps us live instead, right? So we have the capacity as individuals to go and rescue like some of these meaningful sort of stories for ourselves. So that despite all these sort of apocalyptic story that you're telling us, in the individual path, we can still find some salvation.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's this time of like opportunity for weaving all these different traditions are available, and that's the nature of Aquarius. But it's still like when it was working, when the Piscean age was working, for all the problems, it held the whole civilization for 2,000 years. Like what Christ said through the priests and all this is like, it's eternally true. It's still true. It's like when you read the Bhagavad Gita, it's still true, so it's like it's food for the soul. It's centering. And so it becomes dangerous when it becomes like, you're a seeker, your life is oriented around spiritual, trying to grow yourself, evolve yourself. But the masses aren't thinking that way or not experiencing it. So there's like you're kind of you're like in a group of people that are doing this. I mean, I was part of that too, right? I'm like, I was doing it with Joseph Campbell and Timothy Leary, and you're like carrying it on, you're using the experience of your generation and the tools you have available.
Okay, well, HinduDave, thank you very much, for like going through these fascinating subjects today. And I think we have a little bit more to talk about on Jungian psychology next video. Okay,
wonderful,
next video is going to
brother.
be. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very
You're
much.
great,
and
man.
take care and bye.
Great. I love you, bro. You're a good new friend. It's a pleasure to do this with you, and I'm so happy you came up here too and met me and hung out in my place too, the mystery school. We'll do a when you come up here, we'll do some interviews at the mystery school. I'll explain what I'm up to here.
Sure. Well, very quickly we can say now. So HinduDave has a beautiful hot spring sort of house plus resort in Pai, and is possibly going to do some retreats in the near future. So
Coming
let's
up, yes.
let's pencil it down. But for now, thank you very much again, for spending time with us and enlightening us on all these fascinating topics of mythology and symbols and how they can be used, and they're very important, and how important they are for our psychology and for our well-being, right?
Particularly now, these things, the eternal truth is more important than ever, that particularly at time of crisis, global crisis and things. And it's like, oh,
Cool.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hey,
Okay,
man.
Dave. You take care. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you too. We'll talk soon,
Sure.
huh? Let's talk to
Ciao.
each other. Talk about
Yes.
time together. I love to talk to you.
Okay. Take care.
Okay. Bye bye, man. Bye bye.